Okay, another rant here. They got on news again. Whoopi Goldberg is in trouble because she said that the Holocaust was not about race. If you want to dig down, deep down into the reasoning for the Holocaust, no, it wasn't about race. It was about more religion than it was race. Because if it was about race, then Christians who were born in a Jewish as a Jewish descendant but were Christians would have been persecuted just as much as Jewish people who believed in the Jewish faith were, but they weren't. If it was about race, then those Jewish people who put their children into Christian schools and taught them to be Christian would have been punished just as much as any other Jewish-born child who practiced Jewish religion. So in that sense, no, it wasn't about race, it was about religion. It was the religion of the people, not the race of the people, that caused Hitler to go after him. And even then, it wasn't about that. It was about giving the people a boogeyman so that Hitler could have complete control. Because Germany was going to crap back then. And Hitler needed something other than the government for the bad economic situation to point at as the boogeyman. And so he pointed at the Jewish people. He made them the boogeyman. And that's all it was about. Power. It wasn't about race, and it wasn't about religion. Hitler used race and used religion as a way to get what he wanted, which was power. There's a difference. So punishing Whoopi Goldberg for looking at the deeper issue of what the Holocaust was about is wrong. Wrong. It was not simply about race. Because if it was about race, little Jewish boys and girls could not be put in a Catholic school taught Catholicism and be able to escape the Holocaust. Little boys and girls and women couldn't go and get themselves a passport that showed them as Christian and escape the Holocaust. If the only thing it was about was race, then you could see that the person was clearly Jewish without knowing their faith, their religious faith, and persecute them simply on how they looked. But you couldn't. You had to know what their faith was, what their religious faith was, to persecute them. The only way the German government could tell who was Jewish and who was not was by their religious faith. They didn't have a different skin color. They didn't run around looking like anybody else, like somebody else. Like a black man doesn't look like a white man. No. Many of the Jewish people of Germany looked just like their neighbors, their German Christian neighbors. But because of their faith, they were singled out. And because of Hitler's need for power and to give a boogeyman for the wrongs of the government, Hitler used the Jewish faith as something to go against. And it wasn't even just the Jewish people he went after. He went after anybody who was not blonde-haired, blue-eyed. Because even Hitler said he did not belong in the utopia. Because he didn't have blonde hair and blue eye. It was about a master race being used as a means to cause a war. As a means to be able to get the people to vote for him. And put him in power. He first needed a boogeyman against the government so that he could get the people to vote for him. And the boogeyman he chose was the Jewish faith. Not the Jewish people per se, but the Jewish faith. Because somebody could have been born generations back to a Jewish person, but they had changed to a Catholic or a Christian belief, and for generations after that became Christian, and they were not persecuted. But if you were a present-day Jewish faith person, you were persecuted. But you could hide in broad daylight, so long as you got rid of anything that identified your Jewish religion. And you started acting with the Christian religion and belief. And once you did, they wouldn't know if you were Jewish or not. They would think you were Christian. And therefore you belonged in Germany. So it wasn't about race. Because many of Jewish people are white. Just as white as any other German person. It was about religion. And when you dig deeper, it wasn't even about religion. It was about power. Straight up power. And a tool to be used as an excuse to grab that power. That's what the Holocaust was about. That's all it was about. They had to have a boogeyman to punish. So who else should they pick than somebody of a different religion than most the German people? And that was the Jewish people. The people who practice a Jewish faith. So let's stop this hem-hawing about, let's punish Whoopi Goldberg because she said that the Holocaust wasn't about race. No! It wasn't! And if you had 2 cents worth of brains to think further than past your nose, you could really realize that. Anti-Semitism as a whole is not about race. It's about a religion, a religious belief. Just because the religious belief of the Jewish people happen to connect to their race doesn't mean it's about their race. Because there are plenty of people who are born of the Jewish descendants who are Christian and not Jewish. Their place of origin might be Judaism, might be of the same Jewish people, but it's not Jewish. They are Christians, therefore looked at differently than what the Jewish religion is looked at. The Jewish religion is the only religion that is named after a race. Other than that, you couldn't tell a Jewish person from most white people, or if they happen to be black and Jewish. You couldn't tell unless they identify themselves by their faith. Not by their race, but by their faith. There's a difference. Not by their origin of birth, but by their faith. Because the people who were born in Germany who practice the Jewish faith look like just any other German people. The only difference they had was their faith. So it wasn't about race. It was about religion and faith. And that was for the voters of Germany. For Hitler, it was about power. Having a boogeyman to point at for the woes of the German society. Somebody they could lock up, recognize, and punish for the woes of the German society so that Hitler could be elected. That's all the more it was about. It wasn't race. It was faith and power. So quit jumping down Whoopi Goldberg's throat. She's not saying that the Holocaust wasn't horrific. It was. What she's saying is look at it from a different angle. Look at it from the root cause. Because to simply say it was about race, then why didn't they just indiscriminately lock up every German person who had dark hair and brown eyes? There are plenty of German people out there who have dark hair and brown eyes. But they're Christian. They're not Jewish. But they were not locked up. Those who practiced the Jewish faith were locked up. Those with brown hair and brown eyes that practiced the Jewish faith were locked up. Not the Jewish race, but the Jewish faith. So get it right. And stop jumping down Whoopi Goldberg's throat for taking a deeper look at the cause for the Holocaust than to use the simplified notion that it was about whether you were Jewish or not. A Jewish race, should I say, or not. Whether you were born with brown hair or brown eyes. Because you came from a descendant of a Jewish person. It wasn't. Because they could not tell a Jewish person, a person that's a descendant from Judaism, that had brown hair and brown eyes, that practiced the Christian faith. Unless the person told them, hey, my ancestors were Jewish, but I'm Christian. That would have been the only way they would have been able to tell whatsoever whether somebody was of the Jewish faith. Is by how they practice their religion. Not by their hair color, not by their skin color, not by their eye color, not by the only way, other way, is by the way they talked because of some of the Jewish words they used. But if a Jewish person didn't use one Jewish word, if they didn't have an accent, if they spoke like every other German person, if they showed that they were Christian, they were not persecuted. But they show one hint of the Jewish faith, or speaking with Jewish words of the Jewish faith, they were persecuted. So get it right. It wasn't about race. It was about faith and power. And if Hitler didn't need a bad guy, a boogeyman, something to put the ills of society of that time onto, and chose to put it onto the Jewish faith, the Jewish people never would have been persecuted. Hitler could have chose to put it on to the blacks in the society in Germany, but there wasn't enough blacks back then in the society of Germany. But there were a lot of Jewish faith in the German society. Hitler could have chose to put it on to people who were handicapped, disabled. But there wasn't enough people to persecute to put it onto the handicapped or the disabled. He could have put it on homosexuality, but there wasn't enough people out as homosexual to put it on. And in fact, he did put some of it on to homosexuality. If you caught being a homosexual, you were sent to a concentration camp and you were persecuted and most likely gassed. He didn't put it on people simply because they had brown hair and brown eyes. Otherwise, he would have captured every German person, whether they were Christian or Jewish, and put them in prison for having brown hair and brown eyes. He put people who practiced the Jewish faith. That's not race, that's faith. So think about it. And quit persecuting Whoopi Goldberg for looking deeper into the subject. I just did it. Am I wrong in looking deeper into it? Does that lessen the fact that these people were persecuted? Let alone that the fact is that it wasn't just Jewish people who were persecuted. It just happened to be more Jewish people than gay people or disabled people, because they were persecuted in that Holocaust as well. So it wasn't about race. It was about faith. It was also about whether or not you conformed to society, to what Hitler and most of the German people seen as the right way of society. If you deviated from what they seen was acceptable in society, either by your religion of being Jewish, of the Jewish faith, or by your ability or disability, or by the fact you loved a person of the same sex or not, you were persecuted for that. It wasn't about a race. It was about being different, not conforming, just like any other bigot. Bigotry isn't just the fact of somebody not liking somebody because of their skin color. Bigotry hits the whole realm. Bigotry hits xenophobe, hits homophobe, hits anti-Semitism, hits racism. It's everything. It's all of it. So, let's get it right. It's not about race. The Holocaust was not about race. It was about religion and having a scapegoat, an excuse for the ills of society to grab power. And stop jumping on Whoopi. And I'd say that about anybody. She was not making a racist or a bigot comment. She was making a general statement that was in fact factual. Because the Holocaust was not about race. It was about the religion that the Jewish people practice.